Good evening, and welcome to the latest edition of Hobbservation Point Live. I am your host, Chuck Hobbs. I am smiling. I often get chided quite a bit because people say, Chuck Hobbs, you don't smile enough. You're always mean mugging. You're always shooting the units. And I know I do that sometimes. I had a father who used to always say that one of his problems, he was very similar to Sergeant Waters from A Soldier Story in that he had problems with the concept of Black men constantly smiling and shining and dancing and what have you. He was a serious man, and he extolled for me to be a serious man in all that I do. So more often than not, I am usually shooting in pictures and things of that nature. And I'm happy, like Pharrell's song "Happy," extremely happy because Joe Biden is the president-elect and Kamala Harris is the vice president-elect. And so tonight, I want to talk about that, not necessarily rehashing the events of the last week, but looking forward. What can we look forward to in the Biden-Harris administration? What will the Senate runoff races in Georgia turn out to look like? What will the Donald Trump legal challenges look like that are currently have already been filed or are being filed right now as we come closer to the December 14th Electoral College certification? And then last, I want to take a look at the 2022 midterm elections. So with that, let's get to it. I want to bring my roundtable in. I have back with us my sister, Nik Harris, my sister, Ayanna Hawkins, my sister, Malaika Dowdell, my brother making his debut on Hobbservation Point Live, fellow Honda Campus All-Star Challenge All-Star Hall of Fame, Randy Johnson. Welcome, Randy. We also have my boy, Jay Hayes, straight out of Duval County, Morehouse College, Florida boy, who's going to spit a little bit tonight. And later we will be joined by my little brother, John Thomas, who is a PhD candidate up at the University of Chicago and also a Morehouse man. With that, I'd like to get started with a question that I posed on my Facebook page yesterday, which is, what will you take with you from the past 4 years of the Donald Trump administration? So I want to start first with Nik, and then I'm going to work my way around the horn. Nik, what lessons have you learned over the past 4 years?
Oh man, how fragile our democracy is. Yeah, I mean, I knew we had problems in America, but boy, oh boy, I cried that night that he was elected because I knew we were going to be in a mess. But boy, did he just change my version of what that could be. And to think about the impact when they talk about what happens in America, then is magnified when we think about our world. I never dreamed that we would be on the brink of potentially losing our democracy and that, we would be looking up to North Korea and Russia. I mean, would be talking and leading our world. I never thought we'd be there, Chuck.
Yeah, I totally understand. Ayanna Hawkins, you wrote a blog earlier today that I shared on my Facebook page. Do you mind talking a little bit to our viewers tonight about your thoughts over the last 4 years? What lessons have been reinforced from your perspective?
Well, the major lesson is to be reminded that we win, but we also have to be mindful that the backlash is always going to be swift. It's always going to be the attempt is going to try to not only to push us back, but to push us back several steps. And as we've seen over the last 4 years, they were talking about all the executive orders that are pending to undo the damage that has been done over the last 4 years. So that's where we're getting started. We're actually starting back from where we started, almost 12 years ago. I mean, just that idea. So the backlash is always going to be just as intense as the progress that we make. So we have to stay vigilant.
Amen. With that, Malaika, what have you learned? What have you taken with you from the lessons from the last 4 years?
If I were to be positive and glass half full, it's the power of mobilization, starting with 2018 and looking at it again this year. If we band together and we march to the beat of one drum, we can make change. Glass half empty is just to never underestimate how far people will go in their pursuit of evil. So this was not just Donald Trump. He had plenty of co-conspirators working with him.
Jay Hayes, with respect to this question, where are you right now? I know that you spit a lot on Facebook and on Twitter with regards to your thoughts on this. I want to give you the mic to break some things down in regards to what the legacy of the Trump administration will be from your perspective.
Well, to borrow from Nik earlier, in 2016, I was disappointed for like half a second, because when he won, I felt like, well, that's just who we are. I mean, I don't tell myself lies. I accept where I am, but I also saw it as an opportunity, and I remember how much people hated Bush, and that led to us getting Obama, to become the first African-American president elected in this country because he was so terrible. And then to have Trump come in, to be as terrible, I felt like, all right, if we survive this, or who survives this, we might have a chance to really move this country forward in a significant way. And oftentimes, too many people feel like we can move forward without actually having real skin in the game. And sometimes, man, to really get things clear, you got to knock somebody upside the head or have their heads knocked in for them to understand the stakes. And Trump exploited every single loophole that wasn't legislated or whatever, and he's made it clear that we got to shore some things up in our democracy, small d democracy.
Amen with that. Randy Johnson, what are your thoughts, brother? And again, welcome to Hobbservation Point Live.
Thanks for having me, Chuck. I think that the one takeaway I'll take from this 4 years is the danger of transactional leadership. One of the problems that I've seen over the last 4 years is that when you have a leader who deals strictly in that brief hand-to-hand transaction kind of leadership style, is that they don't stand for anything in particular. What they wind up doing ultimately is not choosing a side, not standing for anything. They're very fine people on both sides of this argument because you don't want to offend anybody because you might need something. You think you might need something from that person, or you don't want to offend. You don't want to take a stand because it's too controversial because you're looking at purely the idea of the next transaction.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Randy, while I have you, I want to ask a question that we talked about before we went on air this evening about the legal challenges. Now, I will let all my viewers know that I have a podcast on this subject that should drop first thing in the morning, where I'm going to be dissecting what the Donald Trump legal strategy is in the states that he has found himself, I say defeated in, but trailing in, depending upon, like Malaika said, whether you're glass half empty or glass half full from a perspective standpoint. So look forward to that tomorrow. But Randy, I want to ask you, I know we have several lawyers on the panel here. I want to ask you, what are your thoughts, having had a chance to take a look at the complaints that have been filed? How are you feeling about the chances of the Donald Trump administration being able to actually mount a comeback through the court system?
Well, the complaints that I've read are problematic in the sense that, as a trial lawyer yourself, when you file a complaint, you have to have some concrete facts in which to determine whether there's an actual controversy. You can't just say, well, something went wrong without any, without a scintilla of evidence to back it up. Most of the complaints that I've read over the last, today and, over the weekend, don't allege that anything happened other than the bare naked allegation of fraud. And that's problematic. And, there's also this, this hearkening back to the attempt to link what's going on now to what happened in the 2000 election with Bush v. Gore. But the facts of that case are particularly different and distinctly different from what we're dealing with right now.
Amen. Ayanna Hawkins, what are your thoughts with regards to the legal challenges? Are you seeing that some of your followers are concerned about that too, or some of your Facebook friends? I see a lot of angst out here as I'm scrolling up and down my timeline. On one hand, everybody's excited that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have been declared the victors by the mainstream media. But on the other hand, there are a lot of folks who are still sweating bullets, afraid that we are about to look at Bush v. Gore 2.0, or even worse, Dewey defeats Truman 2.0. Ayanna, what are your thoughts?
So far, I have not seen a lot of concern on that. But what I have seen, I think, from those on the opposite side, those who are disappointed, I've seen a lot of the allegations going back and forth. And what I'm troubled by, I think, to piggyback on Brother Randy's point, is that they're not based on anything. You know, I got into a sort of a tiff with someone who said, well, you know, the election was stolen. We've been calling fraud since 2016. And I pushed back on that. And I said, you know, first of all, we didn't call it fraud in 2016. We understood that he was duly elected. We understood that there were some irregularities. There are always irregularities, but no one said that he was, I mean, well, I'll take that back. We did claim that he was illegitimate, but I think that that was something that we claimed sort of as just part of our, you know, concerns and our, you know, emotional aspect of it, but that the actual allegations of fraud came from the other side. If anyone recalls, there was the commission that the president convened where he claimed that there were these 3 million illegal votes that had been, you know, which was, of course, ironically, the amount of votes that Hillary Clinton, you know, got higher than he did in the popular vote, and he claimed that all those were, you know, had been undocumented immigrants. And then he had this commission and then never came up with any findings. I think they met twice. And the person who was ahead of that was Chris Kobach, who has sort of made his name making these same allegations, but made no evidence and had no case. And so I think that that's what I'm concerned about. I think that if you continue to cry that and you continue to say that into that atmosphere, people are going to question the results, but you still have to come up with facts. I mean, we had facts back in 2000 when we started looking at election protection and started looking at the procedures that were undertaken to push people off the voting rolls. We had facts to back that up. They need to come back with the facts.
No, absolutely. And Ayanna, you bring up some very salient points similar to what Brother Randy did in regards to when you're in court and you're filing civil lawsuits. You definitely have to go beyond just hearsay or what you suspect may have happened. You have to actually bring evidence. And one of the things that I think is important moving forward over the next few weeks, when you're talking about election irregularities that the Trump administration is alleging in these complaints, is whether or not they will actually be able to produce those irregularities, or whether those, again, are just allegations that are thrown out there against the wall to see what sticks. Nik Harris, I want to finish that point with you. Put your legal hat on. What are your thoughts with regards to arguments that you may be hearing or seeing that the Biden-Harris win was illegitimate and due to voter fraud? What are your thoughts, sister?
I watch Fox News. I'll say this. I'm not seeing as much of that on my timeline. I continue to say if there's fraud, bring the receipts. That's what we say in our community. Show us the receipts. I looked at it the first night and I said, he swears that it's been rampant fraud. By the way, it's been legitimate on all the states that he won, but any state that he lost, it's been fraud. If it's that much fraud, why do you have a multi-million-dollar fund saying that you're going to pay people to come forward with the facts about fraud? At the end of the day, show us the receipts. Bring the receipts, bring it to a court of law. The one thing that gives me hope is that this is now Trump's court. This is our Supreme Court, but I look at it and go, I hope that when these allegations of fraud are disputed and he's not granted an appeal, we hope they'll come along. But if our last 4 years that we've seen are indicative of what we're going to see, they're still not going to believe it. And so I think we just have to keep pushing forward. Again, if there's fraud, bring the receipts forward. How do you have an argument to debunk what hasn't even been brought forward?
Nik, I agree with you on that. And one of the things that is very interesting to me is, you know, we had last week on our show, Jimmy Green, who is a longtime Republican. He calls himself an independent now, but Jimmy Green, if you're watching, you don't fool me. I know that you're still a Republican at heart, but he was very much involved with the Lincoln Project. And for those viewers who are not familiar with what the Lincoln Project was, it's a group of Republicans. Many of them were Bush administration alumni and or John McCain campaign alumni who just were never Trumpers. They are still Republicans, still ardent conservatives, but they never made peace with Donald Trump based upon the negative comments that he made during the primary season in 2016 towards Jeb Bush, and the negative comments that he made about liking soldiers who didn't get captured about John McCain. And so they had a very effective political campaign season this year where some of their commercials were just spot on awesome in regards to being able to chip away at Donald Trump. Now, what their goal was to not necessarily be an amen corner for Democrats and or independents that were never going to vote for President Trump in the first place, but they were trying to siphon off some Republican votes from individuals who did support President Trump in 2016. And while we're still waiting on the final data to come out with regards to how effective that was, I will say this. When I hear the president and some of his surrogates speaking about irregularities in regards to, well, wait a minute, Republicans won in this state, this race or that race, but somehow Joe Biden, yeah, the issue, Mr. President, and your surrogates is that there were some Republicans in some of these states that did vote for Republicans down ticket. They just didn't vote for you. They voted for Joe Biden. And so with that, it will be interesting. We'll keep our eyes on that. And again, make sure you check out my podcast tomorrow on Hobbservation Point on Spotify as well as Apple Podcasts. I want to go to the second question, which is regards to divided government. Right now, if things hold true, you have Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. They will be inaugurated on January 20th of 2021. As it stands right now, Democrats lost some seats in the House of Representatives this go around. The Republican Party still is in the lead in the Senate right now, and that will depend greatly upon the outcome of the runoff races in Georgia, where you have John Ossoff facing off against David Perdue, the incumbent, and you have our Morehouse brother, Raphael Warnock, facing off against Senator Kelly Loeffler. I want to come to you first, Malaika, on this, because in our chats, we've had some discussions in our chat groups about this. How do we make up ground in those races in regards to now that the fields are cleared and you've got 2-on-2, what is it that we, the people who support democratic politics or progressive politics, need to be doing from now until early January to try to make sure that Brother Warnock and Mr. Ossoff are able to join the Senate come the middle of January? Malaika, take that.
We've got to keep the momentum going. So we can celebrate on Saturday and Sunday. Today, we have to get back to work. We have to keep our eye on the prize. If you live in Georgia, we need you to make sure that you are positioned to vote, especially with an unknown pandemic. So if you live in Georgia and need to, I'm about to start quoting some URLs because we need to be about action. So if you're in Georgia and you need to request your ballot, you can go to ballotrequest.sos.ga.gov to make sure that you have requested your absentee ballot. Then you can track it as well at georgia.ballottrack.net. So the first call to action is be involved, make sure that you are ready, prepared, got your hype back up to start voting mid-December, and the actual election day. That there's a high level of awareness about both Ossoff as well as Warnock, and that we get people out. So the GOTV, as we know, for runoff election is not typically in our favor, right? So we have to make sure that we maintain this energy and continue to build it up in this race. I heard the Lincoln Project. I heard Steve Schmidt saying that the Lincoln Project is going to be supporting these races. Andrew Yang is moving to Georgia for 2 months. So this is serious. This is going to determine how well Biden-Harris is going to be able to manage through this government, because as we know, otherwise it's just going to be completely deadlocked. So this race is of utmost importance. So if you do not live in Georgia, you can still volunteer via fairfight.com, which is Stacey Abrams' organization. She's been an amazing fundraiser, and you can volunteer there, as well as you can donate via gasenate.com. So I'm sorry to be here calling off all these URLs, but this time is for action. We cannot let our foot off the brakes. Figure out how you can get in and help and drive these two men to the U.S. Senate.
Very well said. I also want to welcome John Thomas to the broadcast. Good afternoon, Brother Thomas.
Good evening. My apologies.
Yeah, good evening. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, my apologies for being late. I've been wearing this hoodie now for the last, I had it on November the 3rd, I took it off, and now I can officially wear it again, so I'm here.
It's all good, John, but again, we're always glad to have you. And the question that I was just asking Sister Malaika is with regards to what is it that we need to do from a ground game standpoint to help push Brother Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff over the hump here in their Senate runoff races against Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue, respectively. Go ahead, John.
All right. Well, first of all, I would say that, I work for the AME Church. I work for the AME Church newspaper. And today, our Bishop of Georgia sent out an email to his church saying, I need you to register all your members who have not registered to vote, and we need to make sure that our members come out. You know, some of the concerns that we're having is the fact that will Black people come back out for a runoff? And I think that we have to be mindful of I have family in Georgia, y'all have family in Georgia. So for the next 70 days, we are all Georgians. For the next 70 days, we have to reach out to our alumni who are still there, our friends who are still there. And I think that Stacey Abrams has shown us what needs to be done. And now all of us need to unite behind that. And also, quite frankly, if you have $20, don't go to Starbucks, send the money to Warnock and Ossoff. One of my concerns is that Ossoff polled behind Biden. So while Biden is going to win the state, Ossoff, if he had been polling with Biden, would have won outright, well, would have been above him to go into the runoff. But now we have a situation where Ossoff is polling behind Biden. So we have to impress to African-American voters, especially because right now we're talking to our brothers and sisters, the ticket goes together. The brother and Ossoff go together. Now, I'm hopeful that the Georgia Democrats will link them together and they'll run together, because Black people need to understand that a vote for Warnock and Biden and Ossoff is the only way to break this Senate gridlock. But I think we could give money, we can call our friends, and we can definitely, those of us with Georgia connects can push this, because this is now a national race for all of us. Because if Biden doesn't get that Senate, we've already seen Mitch McConnell today basically buying out the president's lies and saying, oh, well, you know, until the Electoral College won't convene until December the 14th. The certification is December the 7th. They're hamstringing this administration. McConnell may have been Biden's buddy for 20 years, but he's clearly publicly toting the Republican line. Privately, other things may be going on. We don't know. But it's imperative that we use our Georgia Connects to work this out.
Indeed, John. Jason, I want to ask you that too. What John just said regards to McConnell and how they're towing the line, seem to speak. Have you been a little bit shocked and or disappointed that there haven't been more current Republican politicians that have gone ahead and said, listen, the votes are what they are. Congratulations, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. I actually thought that as hard of a time as we give President George W. Bush, well-deserved in many respects for things that, you know, we talk about quite a bit on this show. On the other hand, I thought that it was very classy what he said yesterday in regards to congratulating Joe Biden and Kamala Harris on her historic race. And she mentioned that most definitely. But at the same time, very few Republicans other than George W. Bush and Mitt Romney seem prepared to come on out and actually do what so many leaders worldwide have, which is go ahead and legitimize the American election results. Jason, what are your thoughts?
I'm not surprised at all. I've been paying attention to the Republicans since 1980, and the only thing that they are concerned about is power. And they understand that even though Trump lost, 71 million people voted for him. And Trump is as petty a person as petty can be. So they don't want to upset him in any kind of way. One, while he still has power, which he still has like another, I think, 72 days or 71 days from now. And in addition, they don't want him to bring the wrath upon their own personal campaigns later on down the line. So no, I'm not surprised. To see how Trump is behaving, to see how Mitch McConnell is behaving, that's par for the course, because I've seen nothing from Mitch McConnell since 2010 other than this.
Absolutely. One of the other things that we discussed a little bit off air, John, before you joined us earlier, is in regards to up and down my timeline, y'all. I actually have quite a few Republicans who actually lurk. Many very rarely will come on and say something. I've actually had some Republican friends of mine say, Chuck, I'd like to say something, but your crowd is tough. It's a tough crowd. Now, and I'm proud of that, because I have a very highly intelligent group of people who follow and read and make comments each and every day when I am doing my part. But with that, I have noticed that quite a few Republicans are mad. And I'm saying big mad, not kind of, sort of. It's just like little kids who are like, well, I didn't get picked in the pickup game, so I'm going to take my ball and I'm going to go home. I am seeing that more and more. And the way they are doing that is in regards to saying they are about to have a mass exodus from Facebook and Twitter, and they are going to head on over to, is it Parler? Yeah. Who wants to hop on that first? Actually, I want Nick to say something about it first, and then everybody just weigh in about this mass exodus of conservatives who are so mad about the Joe Biden Kamala Harris victory that they don't even want to play on the Facebook and Twitter playgrounds anymore.
Chuck, all I had to add was bye. You cleaning up my timeline for me. Bye. We don't miss you. I've said already what this site is going to be. It's Facebook and Twitter 2 years ago with no controls. Chuck, I got to jump in on one thing you just asked. Are we shocked? No. Did we see the news today come out that instead of it being 545 children that we don't know where their parents are, we're at 666? And I thought, wow, 666, that's a sign of the devil. That makes sense. This is a Republican Party that sat back while we separated children from their families. We do not know where these children's families are. And today we find out that a third of them were babies, toddlers under the age of 5. So when I say to these folks, bye, leave, good riddance, go, we have got to commit ourselves to decency. I've said it before. I'm going to say it again. How long before we realize how many hate groups will be registered under this new site? They cannot get away with this now legitimately on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok. Why? Because there are controls, because we're not going to allow fake news without adding these caveats or warnings. So now we're going to give folks, and let's be real, mostly white folks, a free-for-all on a website where they will continue to organize and continue to spew hate, because that right now is what that party is about. We know it. We saw it. That's why we have 666 kids that do not know where their parents are. Again, bye.
Absolutely. Ayanna Hawkins, what about you? Do you have any conservative friends left on your timeline? And if so, are they on tantrums as well, that they are angry and they're going to run away looking for attention? Because usually we all remember when folks were kids. I don't know about how y'all were raised, but the way I was raised, I never even opened my mouth to tell my parents I was going to run away, because like most Black folks, the answer would have been, well, make sure you pack, because once you walk out that door, you can't come back. So what are your thoughts in regards to that? Is this an attention stunt from petulant conservatives right now, Ayanna?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this whole please don't gloat or, be sensitive about our feelings. And these are the same people who spent the last 4 years rubbing it in our face that not only did they win, but they won big. I mean, these are the same people that literally, I think that they carried Ruth Bader Ginsburg's body off the steps of the Supreme Court, and then they immediately shoved their nominee in and down the throat. And then, of course, going backwards, of course, back 4 years when they decided that they weren't even going to give a hearing to Merrick Garland. So, no, I'm not surprised. But, I just want to, weigh in on that point that Nik just made about that 666. You read my piece earlier, and it's like, people keep saying they're surprised and they're like, this isn't who we are. This has been who we are since we took children out of the arms of their mothers on the slave auction block. So let's just let that go. That's who they are. And exactly. Goodbye. Good riddance. Stay in your feelings. We're not here for it.
Amen, Ayanna. Randy Johnson, you and I have been talking for almost 30 years now, ever since I was playing Quiz Bowl at Morehouse and you were dominating Quiz Bowl up at North Carolina Central University. We've been talking about people who appear to be tough, but they're not really that tough. And yet, we see time and again, as Ayanna just alluded to, instead of having intelligent discourse on the issues that are so important to all of us, you have people who go to the lowest common denominator and they want to start stuff. They want to start trouble. They want to spike the football and things like that, because they did have some electoral victories back in 2016. And now, again, they look like petulant toddlers. I have to continue to focus on that. Randy, what are your concerns in regards to the males, though, that are not just petulant toddlers, but the ones that the FBI, the CIA and other organizations have been warning us about, the Southern Poverty Law Center, for years, that the biggest threat to security here in these United States remains white males who are radicalized with regards to white supremacy. Randy, what are your thoughts?
So my biggest concern about this mass exodus to Parler is that we lose a very valuable lens into what's being said in that space. One of the great things about social media is that it kind of gives you entree into rooms that you're not normally in. It kind of allows you to eavesdrop on conversations that you probably wouldn't have heard otherwise. Now we have a whole site that's dedicated to that kind of discourse. And it doesn't seem to me as though that kind of discourse gets, reduces in that space. It feels like it gets worse. I'm more concerned about people being empowered and emboldened by what they hear in those spaces that we're not hearing. And, when it manifests violently. That's a really pressing concern, especially in light of some of the rhetoric that we've heard over the summer, and some of the incendiary rhetoric that has been kind of pushed around in the wake of the 2020 election. So I'm really kind of deeply concerned about what that looks like going forward, what comes out of those spaces that we're not when we're not in the room.
Absolutely. John Thomas, along those lines of what Brother Randy Johnson just said, let me ask you this. One of the things that Joe Biden highlighted repeatedly during his speech on Saturday night is something that former President Bush praised him for in his discussion yesterday, is that he wants to be the president of all of the United States. Cognizant that we have 70+ million people who did not vote for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, 70+ million people who are devotees to Donald Trump, Pence, and conservatism. Is it possible, or are we just basically chasing at windmills to think that in 2020 and moving forward to 2022, that there is a way to foment bipartisan consensus here in these United States? What are your thoughts, John?
Well, okay, first, I was reading a piece today by people wondering what Trump's effect will be after, since we have these 70 million people. But let's remember, we had George Wallace, we had Ross Perot. There's been a third party or a big figure of a Republican Party that's been around, although Ross Perot wasn't quite that bad conservatively, but the people who came after him on that party were, and you've had a Pat Buchanan. Republicans have always put up these lightning rods that have lasted for 1 or 2 cycles, and then they're gone. So the question is, how much of this, yes, Trumpism is here, but how much of it, how much has affected the Republican Party? How much of this will be, for instance, I'm from Tennessee. Tennessee voted from Trump by a 2-1 margin. But of those people who voted for Trump, I mean, were they just voting mainline Republicans, or were they voting for Trump? I mean, these people, the soul searching that we're asking people to do, like, do you know what your vote for Trump meant? Most of these people, they just voted for the guy who was Republican. Like the Latinos in Texas who voted for Trump, who told them what he wanted to do for their people, like the people who found the acceptable pieces in Trump and then still voted for him. So can we cast a side eye at 70 million people in this country? If we do, we're in the middle of a civil war. I think of those 70 million, most of them, honestly, the witting accomplice to this racist man, I think there are people on the other side of the aisle who are willing and open and we're looking to work with. And I think Biden is the best bet to try to bridge together this American gap. But you're going to have those diehard Trump people, maybe a quarter to a third of the Republican Party, maybe more, definitely not a majority, who Biden could come in with angel's wings and he could do no right. So I think it is incumbent upon the Republicans as they go through, and I would say a word, but we're a family-friendly show, as they go through their party, the show that it has been, to figure out what they're going to do next, I think we'll pick up some moderate Republicans. But honestly, McConnell's behavior, the behavior they're modeling, let's be clear. McConnell of the Senate man is one. They know this. They're modeling for the base. But I hope like 2024, we'll see how much of this base is left. But in all honesty, Chuck, coming from a red state, I know, and looking at my neighborhood and seeing the Trump signs, some of those folk, they would have voted for red if it was a ham sandwich. So I think they may be open to Biden. But there are going to be some folks that we're going to have to watch.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that's interesting that I want to get into our third point, which is looking forward to 2022, is the concept that I noticed that Joe Biden took quite a bit of criticism from the extreme left of the Democratic Party throughout the primary season and even throughout the election. And one of the things that I have noticed time and again, both in traditional media article comment sections, as well as certain comments on social media over the last 48 hours, is that there are some people who are already ready. And when I say some people who are not Trump-Pence supporters, but people who are already ready to criticize Joe Biden for his history of being in the Senate, for the fact that he is congenial, for the fact that he and Mitch McConnell and many other Republicans go way back in terms of politics and what have you. They fear as if he might be too willing to compromise and or push to the center and or to the right as opposed to being to the left, which is interesting because Donald Trump and Mike Pence tried desperately over the course of the general election season to make out Joe Biden to be this uber liberal second coming of Fidel Castro. Likewise, with the same with Kamala Harris, despite the fact that both of these individuals were moderate to conservatives throughout as far as Democratic politics are concerned, throughout their history. So with that, I want to pick up with you right quick. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had a very interesting interview that was played in a lot of different articles over the course of the last 24 hours, where she basically was speaking to the fact that she has been disappointed that progressives, she's considered one of the rising stars in the Democratic Party and the darling of progressives in this country. She was pushing back at the notion that it was progressive politics that actually led to some Democratic seats being lost in Congress this go round. She expressed her disappointment in the process, said she was even close to not running for a second term. With that in mind, Malaika, should Joe Biden, over the first 2 years, as we head into 2022, should he try to govern from the center or should he push himself further to the left? I'd like to start with you on that question.
Yeah, yikes. I feel like AOC obviously has very valuable points, but I feel like these are things that really need to be litigated and spoken about in the back room, right? Like these are family matters and they need to work it out. The way that our country right now is so polarized, Joe Biden has to win and have responsibility to be congenial. That's important, right? Like we might not like it. Every policy might not favor us, but we need to get back on track. Otherwise, we really will be headed for a civil war and Parler will take off. However, we obviously want to make sure that some of the left-leaning policies don't go away. Many of the left-leaning policies, many of the things that many of the rights that are attributed to us that we consider, hey, this is what we should get: voting rights, LGBTQ rights and policies. All of those things obviously can't go away. So I think that the left and AOC, et cetera, they need to flex because they have the ability and the platform to flex, but they have to do it in the right way, right? And I'm sure that going to mainstream media and having conversations out in public is really going to help the case right now. We all need to be on one accord. We won the election, we speak it out, but that's not going to help us. Going in as a divided Democratic Party is not going to win any battles in the long run. And I think we got to play chestnut checkers here. So I don't know if that was a real answer, but I think we have to really figure out how to effectively do both and.
Absolutely. Brother John, I saw that you wanted to jump back in on that question.
I have to say that, I agree with AOC. I read the article in the New York Times. I agree with her wholeheartedly. And I'm not mad that she spoke out publicly because, let's be clear, she spoke only after several of the House reps demonized and have been saying, and she's trying to counter not only her people, but also this narrative: socialism lost us the election. Socialism, because the people talking about Biden being a socialist wouldn't know one if they hit him upside the head. AOC is right to say progressives did not lose this election. Poor campaigning and poor messaging from the Democrats lost the election. To anyone who hears my voice here, who is a Democratic partisan, read the AOC New York Times article. We should be disgusted with how the Democratic Congressional Committee ran their races with their big TV ads, their lack of minority outreach, their lack of Latino outreach. They let the Republicans have a clear field in areas. I'm like, how can these people who supposedly have this understanding of ethnic relations of this country, let this happen. And as AOC said, I've beaten DCCC candidates for the center 4 or 5 times. We need to listen and understand that, yes, we do need to be united, but understand when the Republicans try to say, oh, you're socialist, we lost, the party should say, we're not socialists, but more importantly, we have to work on better messaging. And that's the takeaway. Better messaging. Socialism didn't lose this. If the piss poor practices of the DCCC that lost some of those races.
I want to jump back in here for a second.
Go ahead.
And I don't disagree with you in terms of the socialism case, but however, I was on a call last night with our Hobbservation Point sister Ayanna sent out a Zoom link with 1,000 Black women, with the mothers of the Democratic Party, and I've got to push back on the fact that the party came together to mobilize. Black women came together to mobilize. So I feel like there was, and in AOC's point about the campaigning and the pandemic, I think that given the situation, that again, not a perfect campaign, but we are not in a perfect year, right? And the ability of Black women to come together as the coalition, the way that they did, the power of the D9 coming together to support Harris, Donna Brazile, Leah Daughtry, there's a group of Black women that put together a coalition that's stuck across the country, right? And so again, it was a perfect campaign, but I want to make sure that we're balanced. We obviously lost Latinx votes in South Florida, and we need to really understand what was the cause of that. How can we better organize? But how can we take what we did with the Black vote and put that in a bottle and remanage that the right way? So there's just a lot of give and takes, I think. So play in the middle, but.
I'm sorry, Chuck, but if I could just get a real quick, and I'm just going to say that I'm glad you came at the end, because that's exactly what we need to learn. The Democrats learned from their lesson in 2016 and African-American organizing. Biden, thank God for making the shout out he made, because yes, Black people got him elected. And Eva Longoria is canceled for what she said about Black women, because Black women supported this candidacy. If the Dems would learn from Black women how to organize, we can take that to Texas and Florida and get those votes back with Latinos. So thank you for saying that.
For everybody who is watching, this is how we do it in Black College America. Watching the Morehouse brother and Spelman's sister, John Thomas and Malaika Dowdell, disagreeing slightly, but with respect and passionately. That's what we do. With that, Nik Harris, I want to jump in with you next, and then Randy Johnson, I'm coming to you on the question about what AOC has said about progressive politics versus governing from the center. Go ahead, Nik.
Thank you for letting a rattler jump in here and break this up. So let me say this. I need somebody to help me understand. Joe Biden ran as the most progressive president in the history of our country. So when I hear this, I'm always, my mind is blown on so many levels that I go, we have a president who just won with 75 million votes with the most progressive platform we've seen. And yet we're having conversations about should he move to the center. Here's what I want to say. I don't care how we get there. I just want to get there. If Joe Biden needs to go back to his Senate days and they claim he has such a wonderful relationship with Mitch McConnell, so be it. At the end of the day, I'm going to judge Joe Biden based on the policies that he gets passed. I love when I hear he's going to join us back in the Paris Accords. I love when he says that one of my first moves will be passing the Equality Act. We need to expand the Voting Rights Act. We need to be talking about expansion of Obamacare, expansion of Medicare. These are the things people care about. People were coming out. I saw on my timeline already. When am I getting my second stimulus checks? When are y'all forgiving student loan debt? When can I start going to 2-year colleges for free? So as we're having these discussions on, are we too progressive? That's a null point. We are here. And I don't understand why we're having a conversation with the president that has been successful on if we're now being too progressive. Democrats, again, need to be Democrats. We are not the Republican Party. I think we do a poor job in our messaging, and I don't care how Joe Biden gets it done. I just want to see that it gets it done. It's like watching sausage. They tell you don't want to see how it's made, but I want to eat it when it's done. So at the end of the day, bring the policy that is successful.
When you look at the fabric of American political history, I think the first thing that you have to understand is that one of the key features of that political history is the art of compromise. You know, the half loaf versus the whole loaf. Yes, we're talking about whether or not, you know, the Democratic Party should have a more progressive agenda, or whether or not we're, you know, the incoming administration should govern from the center. Fact of the matter is that despite what some might want to see as a more progressive agenda, the reality is that absent a quantum leap in American political thought, the progress that we'll see will be incremental. You know, that being said, you know, it's about picking the battles that matter the most. It's about affordable healthcare. Yes, it's about student loan debt relief. Yes, it's about getting the economy back on the right track after we figure out what the heck is going on with this pandemic. But we can't dictate the agenda and refuse to bring along some of the people on the other side. We didn't get civil rights done that way. We won't get this done that way.
Totally.
Hey, Chuck, you're
muted,
muted.
Chuck.
I'm sorry, sitting here running my mouth. What it is Jason, I'm coming to you, and then Ayanna, I'm coming to you with regards to moving into 2022 or 2024. Do we govern from the center, or do we push leftward? Because that seems to be the trend with Democrats being Democrats, as Nik Harris said. Go ahead, Jason. Follow up with Ayanna.
I want to say first that the Democrats did not control Congress for 66 years by governing from the center. And the issue that the Democrats have right now, which is always highlighted by like AOC and those like her, is that because the Republicans have purged so many fair-minded people from their policy, from their club, so that they're now over here in the Democratic Party trying to make Democrats be more like Republicans. The Democratic Party has always been about big ideas. They are the party of Social Security, the TVA, the Voting Rights Act. You know, all these things, all these big things this country has ever done was done by Democrats, and Republicans have never wanted any of those things. So to have yourself run over by a bunch of conservative-minded people who join your party because they allowed their party to get taken over, and they want to come over here and take over, to me, is asinine. It serves no purpose at all. And what I've seen from this election, it was disheartening because it seems that Democrats still don't learn the lessons. You know, we lost South Florida, you know, in the Latinx vote. We lost South Texas, or didn't do as well as we should have Latinx vote. Why? Because instead of getting Latinx people and Latinos, you know, born and raised and immersed in the culture, Biden appoints Tim Kaine because he speaks Spanish. That's just absurd to me. So we're still not learning the lesson. We're not reading polls. The American people is where the progressives are. And we're still trying to fit a square peg into a round hole as if we're not aware of what's going on. Trump won on faux populism. He won on populist ideas that he was never going to do. If Democrats actually did it, they'd actually get reelected because people could look at tangible things that was done for them.
Speak it, brother. Go ahead, Ayanna.
Okay, so I mean, I can only add, yes, we have to run as Democrats. We also have to acknowledge the fact that we are not running, you know, the way that we used to govern back in the 70s and the 80s, where we had more consensus. As the brother said, they have purged their party of people who are willing to come to the table and compromise. So we have to govern from the left. We also have to be willing to take the loss, because sometimes we're going to take the loss. I look back at 2010. You know, we got the Affordable Care Act through. We took some heavy losses. We have to regroup after those losses, and we have to come back and sell people on the bigness of our idea and how now people are arguing about, we can't get rid of the mandate. We can't get rid of, pre-existing conditions. We can't get rid of dropping, families dropping adult children until the age of 26. Those are things that are baked into the sauce, because once we get our ideas, once they get out there, once they become law, so we just have to push. Start from the center left and push as hard as we can. Think back, look at history. If we had been moderate on some issues, we wouldn't have gotten anywhere. So we have to start and, let them push us, but let's start where we are and then push back.
Absolutely. As we head into the last question that I want to ask for the evening, and this has been a wonderful panel, and we thank everybody who is watching and actually providing comments and or questions in the comment section. But I want to start with John Thomas, and I want each of you as a final summation to give your thoughts on this. One of the things that we have noticed is that between 13 to 18% of Black males supported Donald Trump, according to exit polling data. Now, again, none of this is finalized yet. We will be able to check that out more and more in the weeks to come. But we have been talking about this as a group, both on this roundtable and just as friends for weeks now, in regards to how is it that we reach out and bridge the gap as we move forward into 2022 and 2024. And I think that the discussion we've had over the last 15 minutes about progressivism as opposed to centrism is going to be key to that. But with that in mind, understanding that each of us on this show tonight is a graduate of either Morehouse College, Spelman College, Florida A&M University, or North Carolina Central University, all HBCUs, how do we reach out to our younger brothers and sisters, and definitely our younger brothers in particular, and or brothers that are our age who may not be college graduates? Because again, Donald Trump actually, according to the exit polling, did pretty well across that demographic with Black males. He did well with Black males with high school diplomas. He did well with Black males. And when I say well, I'm talking reasonably well. Clearly, we know that better than 80% of Black males supported Joe Biden. But again, it's somewhat of a surprise to see that Donald Trump actually did that well with Black males without a college degree and Black males with a college degree. So with that in mind, John Thomas, take it away with regards to what are your final thoughts on what we need to be doing over the next 2 years to engage both the brothers who seem disaffected with Democratic politics, as well as Latinx voters who seem to be attracted to Republican politics. Take it away, John.
Okay, well, I'll try to make this quick. First of all, of those 12%, those 18%, they've always been there. And you have to look at Trump. And what I say about Trump applies to both some of these new Black men who supported him, as well as the Latino population. Trump is an aspirational figure who tapped into ideas of American wealth, prejudices against the police in terms of Black men getting in crime, and as well as Latinos who have come here looking for a new opportunity, a new future. So when you take this aspirational character and you look at the people who actually voted for him, remember, we've had Black Republicans all along. And in fact, Jerron Smith, his recently departed top Black aide, went to Howard, pledged Alpha Phi Alpha. So it's not just the HBCU issue. We're talking to young brothers. And we have a new Black Republican in Congress now from Naples, Florida, who's going to be there for a while. So for the people who may have been converted through Trump, it comes out to messaging. These snapshots about, oh, Biden got you because he put people in jail for years. Some people actually bought that hogwash, unfortunately. Or this idea that Dems have done nothing for you, Trump will do everything for you. We have to hone our messaging on policy and bread and butter issues. As we've said on this call, the Democrats are the party of ideas. Let our ideas speak for us with better messaging that works for African Americans and it works for Latinos, some of the Latinos, but those white Cubans in Miami that Trump courted over these years with his ideas and this idea of making yourself an American character, because that's who Trump is. With Trump gone, will many of them stay? I don't know. But I know the Dems can win the battle of ideas if we actually go and fight it. So that's what I would say.
Amen. Nik Harris, what do you say?
Brother Thomas, I have to agree with you. I mean, we sit here, and on the one hand, we're saying, how do we bring brothers back into the fold? But yet we're having a conversation about we should move to the center. Listen, if I can't ask my president for big ideas, who do I ask for? We didn't get to the moon because we were thinking small. So what we've got to recognize is how do we bring those brothers back is to be able to stand on a platform that matters for their lives. If you're trying to start businesses, how do we talk about entrepreneurship? I love that Biden in his Black plan was talking about more money for Black businesses. How do we have conversations? It's not just about criminal justice reform, but that's a part of it. Why are we not embracing full marijuana legalization? The fact that this state can still be red right here in Florida, but yet we have a $15 minimum wage that passed overwhelmingly. Yet we passed Amendment 4 overwhelmingly. How does that possibly correlate to let's be more conservative? Again, how do we win those brothers back? The same way we keep the sisters who are carrying this party doing things that affect them and matter in their community. And that is not moving to center. Let some of these big ideas pass. Let's make a case to the American public. That 74 million that voted for Biden, make a case for why we have to now go get the Senate from Georgia. That's the only way we implement these big ideas, and then work on our damn messaging to make people clear. You want to know why you have expanded Medicare, why you have expanded healthcare? It's Democrats. You want to know why the Equality Act passed for LGBTQ folks? It was Democrats. You want to know why you can go get that small business loan and you're a black man, a black woman? It was Democrats. That's what we do best. That's what we've got to do. That's the only way we're going to win.
Amen. Ayanna, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I don't know if I can add any more to that. I think that's it. And I think, yeah, we have to be who we are. We have to show up and say, this is who we are. This is what our party is. I mean, the other side does not move an inch toward the center. They do not move an inch toward us. So there's no point in us trying to move toward them. And there's no point in trying to cultivate them to get them to agree with us. Let's stand on who we are. Let's stand on our principles, and let's govern on those principles. And yes, grab the big ideas and push those forward.
Indeed. Jason Hayes, you know what? You and I and all the Florida boys, we have our sub threads on a lot of these threads where we use a lot of language that we won't use on this show because we adhere to the quorum here at Hobbservation Point. Cognizant of that, what are your thoughts about the brothers who seemingly would benefit from Democratic politics as well as Democratic candidates, but for whatever reason were titillated by Donald Trump both in 2016 and 2020? Talk about it, Jason.
Listen, brother, all I can say is that those brothers have bought into something that is categorically false, and they are insisting on staying there. And if they had any level of understanding of economic policy in terms of governmental policy, any of those things beyond surface issues, they would not be where they are. So since they are there, I'm of the mindset that, hey, forget those dudes. They cannot stop the show. We got to move farther left, because if we keep asking for the bare minimum with people who are dug in, entrenched with the nuttiest ideas possible, even if you split the difference, you end up with something crazy. And that's how, whenever we get a small gain, they can so easily knock us back, to square one or less, because we're not even asking for anything, that even gives us any kind of real ground of setting ourselves up, to be able to sustain anything. So I say, hey, throw haymakers, man, because all you can do is try.
Indeed. Randy Johnson, again, glad that you had a chance to come out finally and hang out with us here at Hobbservation Point. You definitely will be back. What are your thoughts about the brothers who we need to be reaching out to, and the Latinx community who seem to be somewhat inspired by the messaging that's coming from the Republican Party?
This is a hard conversation to have, and it's a hard conversation to have in part because you have to recognize that some people are coming back, but it shouldn't dissuade you from attempting to earn the vote of the persuadable. And the way that you do that is to have those heart-to-heart conversations about what matters to these individuals who have been enamored by the latest shiny object and, metal-colored plans that have been pushed by the other side. And it also requires you to make a sincere attempt to court those voters. You can't do this with, token gestures. You can't send Tim Kaine in to do, to do a job because he happens to speak Spanish. You can't assume that because you've got 80% of a particular demographic group that the other 10% don't matter, because they do. because we're in a game of inches. And the more persuadable people that you can pull to your side is how you get this thing done. I agree with, the previous presenters in so much as, we're having a conversation about the important things that matter to our community and getting that 10%, that 12% to understand that, one party actually has a viable history and track record of producing these things. The other one does not. There's a clear choice. Allow me to help you make that choice.
Amen. And then Malaika, I want to finish up with you, sister. How do we do this? How do we engage brothers, particularly the brothers who seem to not want to be engaged? We've talked about it on prior shows, and as a group, we definitely have talked about it in our group text chats with regards to some of the rank misogyny that we saw during this election season, centered or aimed directly at the newly elected Vice President Kamala Harris, coming from Black men. How do we address that? I mean, I know there are myriad issues that are systemic that go back to slavery, but in the meantime, as we're looking to build a Democratic coalition over the next 2 years, how do we get that done in terms of engaging brothers and the Latinx community, Malaika?
Sorry. I think that the point of messaging has been made, but more importantly, I've heard a lot of conversation because of the way that the vote went with the Latinx community that, we understand now that the Latinx community is not a monolith. Well, neither are Black folks and neither are Black men. And we need to really do the due diligence of understanding the issues, why they're thinking like that. Is it because they're able to pick up crazy talking points from Donald Trump that appeal to them? Are they just kind of low-hanging fruit folks that are taking those low-hanging messages? What is it that's appealing to them? Really understand. We're sitting here, we're guessing, we've heard, but having those hard conversations. I'm a marketer, I agree. And I really appreciate focus groups and hearing the voice of the consumer, hearing the voice of the voter. Until we do that work, it's not going to happen for us. And some of them aren't going to come over here because they don't want to get told what to do. That was part of the vote. Ain't nobody going to tell me I need to vote Democrat. That's fine. Stay where you are. But there are some persuadables out there, and we need to do our homework and understand that not everybody is reacting the same way to everything, and need to understand what are the hot button issues that we can talk to them about and appeal to them with. So it's the messaging and it's the voter education and helping them understand how these policies affect them and how they need to be thinking about things. Because I've heard a couple times, folks heard Cedric Richmond on the Joe Madison show break down this crime bill that was in question. And folks calling in over this last week saying that conversation alone changed their perspective on this ticket. So the voter education, the messaging, and having the conversation and the research and understanding.
Absolutely. Shout out to Cedric Richmond, Morehouse class of 95, who's actually the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus and was the co-chair of the Biden-Harris campaign. Kudos to him. Kudos to our Spelman sister, Stacey Abrams, our FAMU brother, Vince Evans. There were so many HBCU people across the country who helped make the Biden-Harris ticket actually a winning ticket this go round. And for anybody who suggests to you that going to one of those schools, I think the late Justice Antonin Scalia called it those lesser Black colleges. Well, the lesser Black colleges are still at the vanguard of leading these United States of America, well, at least with respect to the Democratic Party. With that, I'd like to thank each of you, my roundtable members, for coming out and talking with us this evening. And I also would like to thank those who watched us this evening and participated in the comment section. And as always, as Malaika Dowdell just said toward the end there, these issues that are important, we are going to continue to discuss them here on the Hobbservation Point Live, as well as in my Hobbservation Point blog and on my daily Facebook rants. You know, I'm going to be analyzing all of the issues that are critically important to us as a race of people, Black people, and the human race. With that, thank you. Good night. Again, be sure to look out for my blog tomorrow, where I am going to be discussing what's also in my podcast, which is, does Donald Trump have a legitimate chance to actually overturn the election results? You don't want to miss that. Thank you. God bless, and have a good evening. See you next time.